Welcome to Paul's Heart. I'm Paul, author of the book Paul's Heart, Life as a Dad and a 35-Year Cancer Survivor, available on Amazon. November is Lung Cancer Awareness Month, and I wanted to take a few moments and talk about that lung cancer awareness. I've mentioned previously that cancer has hit my family pretty hard over the decades. I am one of 6 family members that were diagnosed with cancer. I did have 2 relatives actually diagnosed with lung cancer. Myself, I've recently been advised that a lung cancer diagnosis is on the horizon. Has not happened officially yet. I'll get to that on a different video. But for this video, I want to talk about one of the 2 relatives that I did have that had lung cancer and passed away. And one was my grandfather, who was a smoker. The other was my father. My father was 70 years old when he passed away. He was diagnosed with lung cancer around the age of 68. Previously, before that, he was diagnosed with emphysema. I was there when the doctor told him, quit smoking and you can get that emphysema reversed. He couldn't. And I'm saying couldn't on purpose. It had nothing to do with wouldn't, didn't. He couldn't. The thing about tobacco, and it's been this way for decades, they slap labels, warning labels on the packs of cigarettes and everything else, and now currently vaping as well, the hazards of smoking or inhaling vaping products and stuff like that. The warnings are there. They're addictive. So it's not really a question if you won't quit, if you don't want to quit. It's if you can. Because once you're hooked, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that, the addiction is just so unbearable. My dad was going for a follow up for this emphysema after he had told the doctor that he quit smoking. He didn't. And a new scan showed that my father had lung cancer. Now the thing is, my dad had been smoking since he was a early teenager. It's what they did back in the late 50s. But for whatever reason, my dad actually decided to ask the oncologist. And again, I was there with my dad through this whole process. He actually asked the oncologist, "So, what do you think might have caused this?" And I just looked at my dad and I said, "You actually asked that with a straight face." He goes, "Well, yeah, I know it could have been my smoking, but I just wanted to know if there could be anything else." My father was a truck driver in various fields, whether it's driving a big rig or working in a quarry. But guess what he did when he drove truck? Smoked cigarettes, or at some point those cigarellos, or the half cigar, half cigarette things. I don't know. I'm not a smoker. Okay. All I know is that my father had been diagnosed with lung cancer now. The oncologist was pretty confident that my father would have a good prognosis. They made the decision that they were going to remove at least part of his lung. They weren't sure if it would be the whole lung or not until they got in there, because the tumor was right by the heart. When the surgery was done, the surgeon told me that they were able to only remove half of the lung, which should have been great. Further recommendations were that my father, they felt that they got everything, including what they call peripheral cells, which are any cells around where the tumor was. They test those to make sure that they're not cancerous. If they test those cells, there's no sign of cancer, they're pretty sure that they got everything, that it hasn't metastasized anywhere else. But they still recommended preventative treatment for my dad, chemotherapy, which I did agree with my dad. He underwent that. That was a different experience for me. I hadn't been exposed to a chemotherapy suite in over 20 some years, and there I was as my dad's caregiver. He underwent that, and then they recommended my dad go through radiation therapy again, preventative, just to make sure that they got it. It was soon after that he completed that. His health went downhill very quickly. The cancer, for whatever reason, had become terminal. And we went through various discussions as the cancer spread and eventually spread to his brain. It became difficult for him to understand everything. He'd have his moments of clarity, and then there were times that you could see that the cancer had impacted his thought process and stuff like that. But during one of his clear moments, my dad had said that, you know, he wanted to live, he wanted to reach his 70th birthday. That's a milestone that isn't easy along my paternal side of the family, but he was that close to getting there, and he did pass his 70th birthday. When I say pass, he did reach his 70th birthday. But as we would go through his house, we would find his secret stash of cigarettes that he had hidden. Even after having his half his lung removed, he continued to smoke, and he confessed to me that, you know, I wish there was something that I could have done different, but I just couldn't do it. And I said, Dad, I get it. And he said, if I would have known this is how my life would have ended up, I wouldn't have started. And I flashed back to when I was a wee boy in school, elementary school, and the lectures that we would get from our teachers. They'd have somebody come in and doing a guest speech on lung cancer, and they'd come in with a box that had an actual lung in it that had been diseased from emphysema or lung cancer, and it looked awful. And of course, the kids go home, if their parents smoke, and they cry and they plead, please quit smoking, please quit smoking. And it always fell on deaf ears. But I told my dad, I said, look, you're a grown man. That's why I never, criticized you for still smoking. I knew the odds of you trying to quit were impossible. I knew how addictive this was. And all we could really do was concentrate on keeping my dad comfortable as he would slowly fade away. I did write about my dad's experience in a bit more detail, in my book. He's in there. But this was the last picture of my dad and I. He passed about a couple weeks later. I'm still sad to this day to have lost him. We spent the first half of our lives kind of distant from each other because of my parents being divorced. We made amends with each other halfway into my adulthood and became very, very close. So I do miss having him here. It's been 11 years now that I lost him. I'm soon turning my 60th birthday, so I'm only 10 years behind the age when he passed. But I can't stress enough, if you really want to have any chance of stopping smoking. I'm not going to give any lectures on lung cancer and stuff like that. And there are other things that can cause lung cancer besides tobacco. There's chemicals, if you work in an industrial setting, dust, asbestos, all that other kind of stuff can play there. But your best bet, if you're dealing with addiction problems such as cigarettes and vaping, get help. That's going to be your best chance trying to deal with this addiction. Again, November is Lung Cancer Awareness Month. I'll talk about my own case in my next video. So until then, this is Paul's Heart.